Well, don't forget that this Sunday, the 7th, is the first Sunday of the month, and therefore there is no evening service. Then 2 weeks later, Easter, there's no evening service on Easter Sunday, but we will be observing the Lord's Supper that day. And then on May the 5th, that's the first Sunday of May, there won't be an evening service then. So we have 3 weeks coming up here in the next 6 or whatever, that there's not an evening service. So that's what's happening there. And today is Wednesday, April the 3rd, and we're going to be doing Psalm 59. If you'd like a handout, they're up here on the table. If you didn't get one and you want one, come get it now. And I'll try to get through with this in about 20 minutes if it's possible for me to do that. I'm not making any promises. Psalm 59. David writes to the chief musician, I don't know how to pronounce that word, Altashith. Means it must not be destroyed. Don't forget this is basically what it's saying. The literal translation, don't destroy this, he's actually in poetic speech, he's saying, don't forget this. Don't let this fall out of memory. It's a miktam, it's an engraving, it's a poem. Not necessarily to be sung. That's so he says, it's a poem, and we put it to music, but remember the poem. I remember when I was teaching literature back years ago, I had all the kids memorize the Song of Hiawatha. Anybody else have to do that when you're in school? By the shores of Gitchigumi, all the good Nokomis is waiting for him to come home. Okay. Dave said, memorize this. Don't let this fall away. Keep this in your mind. And he wrote this poem that was put to music later at the time when Saul sent to David's house to find him so that he could kill him. And we see that in 1 Samuel chapter 19 is what that event is talking about. David has killed Goliath a couple years ago, and Saul promised, whoever kills Goliath, I will give him my daughter to marry. And that girl, that daughter of Saul, was then given to someone else. Then later on, Saul said, well, I'll give David my younger daughter, Michal. And so he does. Then David falls out of favor with Saul. Saul wants him dead, so he sends some guys to the house where David and Michal are living. And David escapes and gets away, but he puts some lumps under the covers, and Michal says he's in there sleeping. And they go back and tell Saul, well, he's asleep. He says, go wake him up and bring him. I want him dead. So they go and they throw the covers back, and there's the bag of grain or whatever. And that's what David wrote this as he was escaping that event. Okay? So we start with verse 1 of Psalm 59. David knew where his deliverance came from. Proper English, from where his deliverance came. Okay? David knew where he had to find the deliverance. So what's he say in verse 1? Oh my God, I'm reading this backwards. Oh my God, you deliver me. Deliver me from my enemies, oh my God. Defend me from them that rise up against me. David understood that there's nothing he could do to protect himself. Now, in our lives, trouble's coming our way, whether it's people coming at us or a monetary problem or whatever it is. Is there something we can do? Yeah, you know, if I see the fire coming my way, I'm going to run. But running from the fire doesn't solve the problem. It just gets me away from getting burnt right now. David said, I want more than just immediate escape from the situation. I want the problem solved. My deliverance, my defense comes from God. And so often in our lives, we depend upon instant gratification. If I can just get out of here right now, but we don't really do anything about it. We don't deal with the problem. We just deal with me getting out of it. And that's not the way to do it. So David says, I'm going to go to God for deliverance, for defense. In verse 2 he goes on. He says, deliver me from the workers of iniquity and save me from bloody men. And you see I've got the definitions there for you. And the definitions of the words are important because a lot of words that we see and we think of them as homonyms of each other. And sometimes even in English it's the same exact word. But in Hebrew or in Greek it's a different word altogether. And they mean the same thing per se. They are homonymic. But there's specific little nuances of difference. So he says the workers of iniquity, those that are practicing habitually in vain emptiness, worthlessness. Their habit, their way of life is valueless. And they're the ones after me. Okay? Save me. And therein, the word save means to be wide open, to be set complete, no boundaries. I'm away from it. Okay? To be totally free. Not free to walk around the maze and be lost. No, I'm totally free. I'm unbounded. I'm away. David then tells of the enemy's character, and he asks God for help. So let's see what he says here about the enemy. He says, those people, for lo, they, the enemy, they lie in wait for my soul. The mighty are gathered against me. Not for my transgression, nor for my sin, O Lord. They're coming after me for no reason. They're not coming after me for anything other than they just don't want me around. If this was punishment for sin or something like that, I could understand this, but they're not doing that. They just don't like me. David could have, on a couple of occasions, killed Saul and didn't. And then went to Saul and said, see, I was right here all along. I could have killed you, but I didn't. I'm not your enemy. And then 2 days later, what's Saul doing? Trying to kill David again. The thing is, Saul didn't see David as his personal, physical, right now enemy. Saul saw David as the enemy to Saul's legacy. Saul wanted his bloodline on the throne forever. God told Saul, if you do right, I'll let your grandsons, but not your bloodline, be on the throne. It'll be David's bloodline, the royal bloodline, the tribe of Judah bloodline. But your daughters can marry into that, and they'll be your... Saul, no, I want my bloodline. So Saul saw David as a threat to the legacy of the bloodline. Okay? David was not a problem to Saul physically. He never challenged Saul physically. Little caution on that. Please be aware, be cautious of, be careful about how much you plan to leave as your legacy. Just do your job. Let your legacy be, he did his job. You don't have to have a building named after you. You don't have to have your star on the Walk of Fame. Just be known for you got the job done. Let that be what it is. God says, I'll take care of this. In due time, I'll raise you up. Well done. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Okay? So, he goes on here. He says, they're not seeking after me for my transgressions, O Lord. They run and prepare themselves without my fault. Wake up, Lord, and behold. And the word here, awake, you'll see the word awake a couple times, and they're different Hebrew words. And in this verse, it's just open up your eyes. Just look, Lord. You know I'm telling you the truth. Okay? So it's a kind of a generic thing. Lord, you see, I see the situation, and I know you see it too. Wake, Lord, open your eyes to my situation. See me. Now see how he progresses this word awake as it's translated in the next phrase coming up. Okay? Thou therefore, O Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, awake to visit all the heathen. Be not merciful to any wicked transgressors. Now think about this. In the poem, David is telling the readers, think about this. I'm asking God to awake and visit the heathen and not be merciful. But the word awake is a different word. It means not just open your eyes, but move quickly. Get on the ball. Lord, you see me, he said in verse 4. Now, do something about it, would you please? Be quick to arise. Then you'll see the word wicked and transgressor there in English, and in Hebrew, they're two different words, but they go together. It's not the wicked and the transgressors, it's the wicked transgressors. So it's a double emphasis there. The vain, the idle, the mischievous ones that cover their act, that try to cover their sin, that they're acting treacherously and deceitfully and unfaithfully, that's all covertly. They're trying to keep it hidden. Those are the ones I want you to go after. Okay? Verse 6. This is a phrase in verse 6 that he'll repeat later on, so I want to bring your attention to it. Look what it says here. They return at evening. They make noise like a dog. They go round about the city. And you'll see on the handout there and up there on the wall, there's a little arrow with an equal sign with the arrow. That's because it's not a direct translation. This is an explanation. If it has an equal sign, that's the direct translation. If it's got a little arrow, it doesn't translate well, so I'm trying to tell you what it is. And if you don't trust me, go look up the translations and you'll say, that doesn't translate very well. One word has to come into a sentence. That then would be a transliteration. So anyway, they return at evening, they make noise like a dog, they go round about the city. They attack daily. Every evening they're coming back. Their attack is noisy. They're trying to get me flustered. They're trying to get me unnerved. They're making lots of noise. And the attack around the city, the attack comes from every side. It's everywhere. They're not giving me any peace on any side. It comes every day. It doesn't let up. And they make noise. They're trying to get me rattled. Behold, look how it says here in English. They belch out of their mouths. That means the noise, referring back to noise, it's gushing. It just doesn't stop. It's overflowing. They gush out their words out of their mouth. Their swords are in their lips. Their sharp words are hurtful words. They're accusatory. For who, say they, doth hear? Who do you think, David, you big lout? Who do you think's going to hear you when you pray? Who do you think's going to listen to us belittle you? They think they are untouchable. They think that no one is hearing this conversation. I preach a message every now and then, and one of the points in it is, always be aware you're not the only person playing the game. If you think you're the only one on the field, you're going to get whooped. There's somebody else. God's got a plan. Okay? These guys are out there attacking David, and they say to David, yeah, who do you think is going to save you? Who do you think hears all this? But what did David say? Awake and see me. Awake, move quickly. Okay? David then, our next point, David understood God is not threatened by unbelievers. When a person, you've probably seen this in a movie or a play or something like that at least once in your life, or read it in a book. Somebody shakes their fist at God. God is not threatened. Okay? Illustration here that never really happens, but bear with the illustration. You're walking across the ground, and the ants are out there, and as you walk across the ground, the ants raise up their one little foot and go, oh, you dirty human, we'll get you. Are you worried about the ants getting you? When a human being threatens God, God's not worried. Okay? Will he take count of it? Will he take account of it? He'll deal with it, but he's not threatened by it at all. I always find it very amusing, sad, and interesting in the book of Revelation where it says the armies of the earth try to fight him. He comes down and they say, I got a gun. Really? What are they going to do? When you see God himself coming down out of the sky, you point your gun at him? It is, and again, it's a bad illustration, but it's one we're all familiar with. How many have ever watched the monster dinosaur movies, and the army goes out and they're shooting Godzilla, and they're shooting with atom bombs, and they bounce off of them? I always wonder, if I shoot a lizard or an alligator with a gun, it'll kill it. But for some reason, all the monsters in the movies are bulletproof. But here's God come out of the sky, and mankind says, oh, we'll aim our guns at him. And God says, okay, and they're gone. He wipes them out. Blood up to the horse's mane. From Jezreel all the way down to Petra. Okay? Wow. Anyway, David understood God is not threatened by unbelievers. Look what he says here in verse 8. He's talking about the condition of his enemies, the mindset of his enemies, and he turns it around and says, but thou, Lord, shalt laugh at them. Thou shalt have all the heathen in derision. Whatever they want, whatever they're doing, whatever they're trying to do against you, Lord, you'll laugh at them and they will be confused. You look back, I wasn't planning on mentioning this, so it just crossed into my mind, and I'm trying to remember. what army it was, but there was an army attacking Israel, and it says they started fighting each other. And the Israelites went out there the next day, and they'd all killed themselves, fighting with each other. There were 3 different bands of soldiers from 3 different countries that had united against Israel, but they all spoke different languages and stuff. And in the middle of the battle, all you know is my enemy doesn't speak my language, and 2/3 of my army doesn't either. So they all started fighting each other. And the Israelites weren't even there. You can look that up in the Old Testament. I can't remember right off the top of my head where that is. Anyway, Jehovah, you notice here, David uses the word Lord, and there's a couple of places where he uses the word Lord and God, and sometimes it's Jehovah, and sometimes it's Elohim. And it's good to know where the difference is. But Jehovah is God's specific name. Other things that terms that we use to refer to God are titles and descriptions. Jehovah, Yahweh, is his name. Okay? He'll laugh at them. He'll deride them. He'll scorn them. The heathen, the massing ones of the foreign nation. And actually that word heathen means anyone who's not God's people. Now in the Old Testament it's referring to Jew and Gentile. And they're used collectively as you're the Jew, you're God's people, you're a Gentile, you're not. Those are terms that are used, but a Gentile could convert to Judaism and a Jew could be thrown out. So it wasn't just all-inclusive and never could change, but those are the 2 basic categories. Like today we would talk about those who are believing saved Christians and those who are not. Okay? You either are one or the other. Okay? So the heathen, those who are massing themselves, they are of a different mindset. They're of a different people. They're not God's people. God shall have them in confusion, and they'll be stammering, they'll be unintelligible, similar to at the Tower of Babel when God says, let's go confuse their languages. They couldn't get along. You're mounting this thing. It's very interesting. I'll digress a second. When we read and we heard lessons in Sunday school and so forth, and even sermons on the Tower of Babel, and God confuses their language and all that kind of stuff, what was going on? Go back and read. God says to Noah, after he gets off the ark, spread out, fill the earth. Back before the flood, what did God tell mankind? Spread out, fill the earth. Nimrod comes along in the area that today would be the Assyrian, Iraq, Iran, Tigris, Euphrates River area. He starts to be a capturer of men. He starts to be an enslaver of mankind. Okay? And he starts to build a tower. Now, how many ever saw this when you were in elementary age flannel graph Sunday school? This tower going to heaven. It's not trying to reach the moon. It just means that it's up in the air, because the heaven starts at your feet on the ground and goes all the way up. They're building this tower to reach to heaven, is how the English says it. They were defying God. And you go through mythologies, and the Greek gods were up on top of Mount Olympus and all that kind of stuff. They were building their tower to show we're just as strong, we're just as powerful, just as united against you as you think. And God says, I'll confuse your language. I'll have you in derision. And they couldn't do anything. So that's a whole other lesson. Verse 9, because of his strength will I wait on thee, for God is my defense. Because you're the one with the strength, you're the one with the authority, you're the one with the ability, I will wait on you. The God of my mercy shall prevent them. And that in English, that's what it says. In the Hebrew, it says, the controller that is kind will protect. Is the closest thing you can get to direct translation. And it doesn't come out as a sentence in English, okay? My God, the controller, that's the word Elohim, of my mercy that is kind, will protect. Okay? God shall let me see my desire upon my enemies. What did David just ask about his enemies? God, take care of them. But read the whole psalm, this whole poem, because he's got some definite sub-requests about this. But what did David generically, what did he say to do? God, will you do this to my enemy? Stop them, defeat them, deliver me from them. Okay? And God will let me see that occur. Now look what he says in verse 11. The title here, David asks that the enemy is defeated but not destroyed. David did not want them all wiped out, ground out. Look what it says here in verse 11. Slay them not, lest my people Israel forget. Scatter them by thy power. Bring them down out of authority, out of power, O Lord, our shield. Because often we need daily reminders that we need God. The Bible tells us in the book of Proverbs, chapter 30, verse 8 and 9. I'll just put it close. Don't give me so little that I curse you, and don't give me so much I forget you. Give me what I need. David says, put them down, take care of them, deliver me, but don't wipe them out. Because I don't want us to forget that there is an enemy. I don't want us to forget that we need to rely on you. And that's something that we want God to just wipe away everything so we can run around in the valley of rosebuds and butterflies and eat our healthy yogurt food and everything is peachy and wow, it's really great. And God says, no, you'll forget about me. David said, we don't want to forget about you. Deliver us, but don't destroy them completely. Help us always know that we still need to look to you. Okay? Verse 12, for their sin of their mouth and the words of their lips, let them even be taken in their pride, and for cursing and lying which they speak. David said, Lord, you judge them by the words of their own mouth. And what was the motivation of their language? Pride. What was the motivation of the people building the Tower of Babel? Pride. What was the problem of Eve and Adam when they ate the fruit in the garden? Pride. What's the devil's problem? Pride. Read it. The Bible tells you. Because of your beauty you were lifted up and went against me, God says to Satan. Satan comes to Eve and says, hey, are you sure God said that? Oh, yeah, he did. Well, then don't listen to him. Why can't you just be your own God? Make your own rules. You don't have to humble yourself to him. And today in our lives, every time we sin, what are we doing? We are in essence saying, well, God, I know what you said and what you want, but I know better. I get to be the master right now. It's pride. Pride is the root of all sin. Okay? Their pride, their arrogancy, their pomp. Verse 13, consume them in wrath, consume them, that they may not be, and let them know that God ruleth in Jacob and to the ends of the earth. Now think about that, you who are reading this. I think the interesting thing here says consume them does not mean obliterate them completely. When it says in English it's consume them that they may not be. Doesn't mean wipe them out. You got to put it in the context of everything he's saying. Consume them that they have no more power. That they're no longer a power against us. But do it until the uttermost part of the earth where there's nothing past that. Don't just give me victory here in my neighborhood, David says. Everyone in the whole world. There's no further part to go. If they're blaspheming you, stop them. Don't destroy them. Take away their power, but let me always know that I need to trust you because they're still there. Okay? Now think about that. The word earth here is the word aretz. It's used throughout the scripture. And it literally means the firmness. And it's a comparative. Dirt, the ground, is firm. Water is not. And that's the first time we see that word used. It's in Genesis chapter 1 where the Bible says, God made the earth and it was water. He said, now let the aretz, the firmness, appear. And that was the ground. So God says, there's the firm stuff. We call it dirt, rock, and so forth. And there's water. And that's what he always refers to. So it's to the ends of the firm stuff. Then David takes a spin on the earlier phrase in verse 6. Remember I told you you'd come up against this again. At the evening, remember they come every evening? At the evening, let them return. Let them make the noise like the dog. Let them go about the city. What he's basically saying here is, go ahead, circle the city, make as much noise as you want. Do whatever you want. but God is in control. God, deliver me. You see, they're coming every day. They're circling the city. They're making lots of noise, but I know you'll take care of it. So let them come. Come on, fellas. Give me your best. God is in control. Let them wander up and down for meat. Let them circle the city till they're famished and they can't find anything to eat. And grudge if they are not satisfied. Let them complain. Let them murmur because they're not getting their goal. Not only they're not conquering the city, they're hungry, they're thirsty. Let them have a rebellion in the ranks. Verse 16, David ends with this, and he says this: while all that's going on, and they're circling the city, and they're griping and complaining, but I will sing of thy power. Yea, I will sing aloud of thy mercy in the morning. When did the enemy come? At night. David said, morning comes, I'll sing of your mercy. For thou hast been my defense and refuge in the day of my trouble. And you'll see the word sing is used 3 times, and it's 3 different words. And I thought that's interesting. The first word, I will sing of thy power. I will stroll around minstrelly. You know, the singing minstrel, he just goes around singing. Of thy power, of thy majesty. Then he says, I will sing, I will shout in a cry of rejoicing of thy mercy, thy favor upon me. He goes on, says, you're my refuge in the day of my trouble. Then in verse 17, unto thee, O my strength, I will lay touch to the strings. Now I'll make beautiful music of it. So we see it's sing every time in English, but it's 3 different Hebrew words. It's, I'll stroll around whistling a tune. I'll shout and cry and rejoice in happiness. But then I'll put it to music, and I'll make a beautiful, beautiful song out of it. O God, my Elohim, my supreme one, the one who is in control. And David ends the 59th Psalm on a note of confidence. God will take care of him. I hope that's been helpful to you tonight. We are done with the lesson. Any comments or questions? Yes, Floyd.
The whole tenor of this psalm, if we were back in that day, would mean so much more to us because of the way David describes. You know, the best thing you can do is build your city on a hill where you can see the enemy coming and you're above them. And he starts out by saying, make me higher than they are.
Yeah.
Make me higher than they are. Then I'll be closer to you.
Yeah.
But all of what they did to defend themselves was to get higher and build walls that were even higher than that so that they could look down on the enemy and the enemy couldn't reach them. And that's the whole tenor of what David is saying here.
Yeah.
And which was so appropriate for that type of society. And
it's difficult for us often to understand the way of life that they went through. When we talk about numerous things we read in the Bible, well, they did this, they did that, and we try to understand it the way we live today.
yeah.
And I was talking to Bob Jones before the service. One of the things we don't do very often in churches is wash feet, but it was a very common practice back then. Well, they were walking on dirt roads in sandaled feet and robes that came down to your knee, maybe a little longer for the most part. And when you as you're walking, you're hot and you're sweaty, and by the time you get to where you're going, even though it wasn't muddy out, you were covered in dust and caked in dirt. And when you the thing was, wash their feet. But we don't, okay, but how much do I relate to that? It's hard to. And you go to where they're in a fenced city up above, and there's a pro and con to that. I get up above them, that's harder for them to get it. But what's the one thing you don't usually find on top of a hill? Water. Water's down there, so you got to work that out. So you'll see the Bible talks about that sometimes. We're on the hill, make sure we have the water. And in Jerusalem, they have the tunnel, Hezekiah's tunnel, that goes down to the spring at the bottom. And that's very interesting. Well, anyway, I digress.